In the quiet village of Ravenwood, people often whispered about Blackwood Forest. It was a place no one dared to enter after sunset. The trees stood tall and dark, their twisted branches forming shadows that seemed to move on their own. Stories of strange whispers and shadowy figures kept the villagers away, but for 12-year-old Ellie, the forest was more than a place of fear. It was a mystery waiting to be solved. She had always been curious about the tales, wondering what secrets the forest might hold. One chilly evening, as the moon rose high in the sky, Ellie stood at the edge of the forest. She felt a pull, as if the forest itself was calling her name. The air was cold, and the sound of rustling leaves made her shiver. But then she heard a faint whisper, soft and inviting. Her heart raced, but her curiosity won over her fear. Holding her lantern tightly, she stepped into the forest, unaware of the adventure that awaited her. As Ellie walked deeper into Blackwood Forest, the world around her grew eerily quiet. The usual sounds of chirping crickets and rustling animals were missing. Instead, there was a strange silence, broken only by the occasional whisper. The shadows of the trees seemed to stretch and shift, almost as if they were alive. Ellie tried to convince herself it was just her imagination, but the whispers grew louder, forming soft, unintelligible words. Suddenly, her lantern flickered, casting strange shapes on the ground. She froze as a shadow moved past her, though no one was there. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. There was no answer, only the sound of her own breathing. But as she turned around, she saw a figure, faint and shadow-like, standing just a few steps away. It didn't move or speak, but its presence sent chills down her spine. Terrified yet intrigued, Ellie stumbled backward until her foot hit something hard. She looked down and saw a small, dusty box partially buried in the ground. With trembling hands, she opened it to find an old map of Blackwood Forest. The map was strange, with markings that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. At the center of the map was a spot labeled the Whispering Tree. Ellie's fear turned to determination. She needed to find this tree and uncover the truth about the forest. As she studied the map, the whispers returned, now sounding like a mix of voices. They seemed to guide her deeper into the forest. "The tree," she whispered to herself. "I have to find the tree." The shadowy figure from earlier was gone, but she could feel eyes watching her. Gathering her courage, she followed the map, hoping it would lead her to answers instead of danger. After what felt like hours, Ellie reached a clearing in the forest. In the center stood a massive tree, its branches twisting toward the sky like reaching arms. The air around the tree was heavy, and the whispers were louder than ever. Ellie approached cautiously, noticing strange symbols carved into the bark. The tree seemed alive, not just with whispers, but with a presence she couldn't explain. She placed her hand on the tree, and suddenly the whispers stopped. The silence was deafening, and then she heard a single, clear voice. "Why have you come?" it asked. Ellie's heart pounded, but she managed to respond. "I want to know the truth about this forest." The voice didn't answer, but the tree began to glow faintly, revealing a hidden door at its base. Ellie hesitated, unsure if she should enter. Summoning all her courage, Ellie stepped through the door and found herself in a dimly lit chamber. The walls were covered with carvings that told the story of Blackwood Forest. Long ago, it had been a peaceful place, protected by a guardian spirit. But when the villagers grew greedy, they cut down parts of the forest, angering the spirit. It had turned into a shadow, whispering warnings to those who dared enter its domain. Ellie realized the shadows weren't there to harm her, they were protecting the forest. "I understand now," she whispered. "You're not evil. You just want the forest to be safe." The shadows around her seemed to soften, and the whispers turned into a gentle hum. As she stepped back outside, the forest felt different, less threatening. Ellie returned to the village, determined to share the true story of Blackwood Forest and ensure it remained protected forever. As Ellie returned to the forest clearing, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The whispers around her were softer now, almost like a lullaby. She realized the shadows weren't chasing her, they were guiding her towards something deeper within the forest. Holding the glowing map tightly, she followed the faint light it emitted. The markings seemed to change, leading her toward a hidden path covered in thick vines. When she cleared the way, she found herself before a massive stone altar. The altar was ancient, its surface covered in moss and strange carvings. At its center was a small orb that pulsed with a faint, silvery light. Ellie reached out to touch it, and the whispers suddenly grew louder. "You have come," a deep voice said, echoing in the air. "But will you prove yourself worthy of the truth?" The ground beneath Ellie's feet trembled as the shadows around her began to swirl. The voice spoke again, calm yet commanding. "If you seek the truth, you must face your greatest fear." Before Ellie could respond, the shadows formed into a towering figure. Its eyes glowed faintly, and its presence sent chills down her spine. The shadow raised its arm, pointing toward the dense forest behind her. Ellie hesitated, but then stepped forward, knowing she couldn't turn back now. The forest seemed darker, the air heavier with each step. Suddenly, she heard the faint cry of a child. "Help me," the voice said, trembling with fear. Ellie's heart raced as she moved toward the sound. She found a small boy, pale and frightened, trapped under the twisted roots of a fallen tree. Ignoring her fear, Ellie rushed to free him. As she pulled him out, the boy smiled and vanished into thin air. The voice returned. "You have passed. The truth awaits you." Ellie returned to the altar, where the orb now glowed brighter than before. The shadowy figure had changed. It was no longer menacing. Instead, it seemed calm, almost protective. "You are brave," the voice said. "Few have dared to come this far. The forest is alive because of me, its guardian. Long ago, I was betrayed by the villagers who sought to destroy this sacred place. I became the shadow, bound to protect what remains." Ellie listened intently, feeling both awe and sadness for the guardian. "But why the whispers? Why scare people away?" she asked. The figure replied, "Fear keeps the greedy at bay. Only those with pure intentions can hear the truth." Ellie nodded, understanding now that the shadows were not a threat, but a shield for the forest's heart. The guardian handed Ellie the orb, its light warm and soothing in her hands. "This orb holds the forest's life force," the voice explained. "Return it to its rightful place, and the balance will be restored." The map glowed again, showing a final location deep in the heart of Blackwood Forest. Ellie felt a surge of determination as she set out to complete her mission. The journey was not easy. The path was overgrown, and the forest seemed to test her resolve with every step. But as she reached the marked spot, she found a small hollow in the roots of a massive tree. Placing the orb inside, she felt a rush of energy. The forest came alive with light and sound, as if thanking her for her bravery. With the orb restored, the forest transformed. The once dark shadows now shimmered with a soft, golden glow. The whispers became a gentle song, soothing and welcoming. The guardian appeared one last time, smaller and less intimidating. "You have done well," it said. "The forest will now thrive, and its story will live on through you." Ellie left Blackwood Forest, her heart full of pride and wonder. She returned to the village with a newfound respect for the mysterious woods. She shared her tale, urging the villagers to protect the forest rather than fear it. Blackwood Forest was no longer a place of darkness and whispers, it was a sanctuary, its secrets safe in the hands of those who truly cared. As days turned into weeks, the changes in Blackwood Forest were undeniable. The once ominous shadows now danced with a soft, golden light, and the whispers carried a gentle melody. Ellie often returned to the forest, feeling a deep connection to its magic. The villagers, curious but still cautious, began to view the forest differently. They listened to Ellie's tales but were hesitant to step foot inside. One day, Ellie stood by the ancient tree where she had placed the orb. The forest seemed to hum with life, and she felt a warm presence beside her. The guardian appeared, now more like a glowing figure than a shadow. "The forest has chosen you," it said. "You are its new protector, Ellie. Guide your people to cherish its beauty, not fear it." Ellie felt a mix of pride and responsibility as she accepted this sacred duty. While exploring deeper into the now thriving forest, Ellie discovered something peculiar, a lantern hanging from a low branch. It was unlike any she had seen before, with a glass casing that shimmered like water and intricate carvings etched into the metal. As she touched it, the lantern lit up, casting a warm light around her. The whispers returned, now clearer and more purposeful. The whispers led Ellie to a small, hidden grove filled with wildflowers and sparkling streams. In the center was a pedestal, empty but engraved with strange symbols. The lantern's light grew brighter, and Ellie understood that it belonged there. Placing it on the pedestal, she felt a surge of energy. The forest seemed to sigh in relief, as if another piece of its puzzle had been restored. Though the forest was healing, Ellie began to sense a new disturbance. The whispers, once soothing, carried a hint of urgency. The guardian appeared less frequently, its glowing form flickering like a dying flame. "The forest is still in danger," it told Ellie one night. "There are those who wish to take its power for themselves." Ellie's heart sank. She thought of the villagers, who had long feared the forest but might now see it as an opportunity for profit. Determined to protect the forest, she decided to speak with the elders of Ravenwood. But convincing them to leave the forest untouched would not be easy, especially with rumors of its treasures spreading through the village. Ellie stood before the council of elders, recounting her journey into the forest and the truth she had uncovered. Some listened with awe, but others were skeptical. "Why should we believe a child's tale?" one elder scoffed. "If the forest holds such power, it should benefit the village, not stay hidden." The room erupted into heated arguments, dividing the villagers into those who wanted to protect the forest and those who sought to exploit it. Frustrated but undeterred, Ellie made a bold decision. "If you don't believe me, then come see for yourselves," she said. A small group of villagers agreed to follow her into the forest, though many still feared its shadows. As they entered, the forest seemed to welcome them, its light and whispers weaving a story of peace and harmony. The villagers who entered the forest were awestruck by its beauty. They saw the glowing trees, the shimmering streams, and the gentle shadows that danced in the light. But their wonder soon turned to fear as the whispers grew louder, forming words they couldn't understand. The guardian appeared, its presence commanding and powerful. "Your intentions will decide the forest's fate," it declared. Each villager was confronted with a test, similar to Ellie's journey. Some were shown their greed, while others faced their fear. Only those with pure hearts could proceed deeper into the forest. Ellie watched as some turned back, unable to face the truth. But a few, humbled by the experience, vowed to protect the forest and respect its magic. With the villagers' trust earned, the Guardian's glow became brighter than ever. "You have brought balance," Elliot said. "The forest is safe, but its peace depends on those who honor it." The villagers who passed the test returned to Ravenwood, sharing their stories and urging others to respect the forest's boundaries. Slowly, the village's relationship with Blackwood Forest began to change. Ellie felt a deep sense of fulfillment as she walked through the forest one last time. The whispers now carried a melody of gratitude, and the shadows no longer felt ominous. She knew her role as the forest's protector would never truly end, but she felt confident that its magic was safe. As the sun set over Blackwood Forest, its golden light mingled with the shadows, a perfect harmony that would endure for generations. One calm morning, Ellie noticed a faint glow beneath the roots of the ancient tree where the orb had been restored. As she knelt down, she realized it was coming from a narrow tunnel that seemed newly revealed. The whispers around her grew excited, urging her to enter. With her lantern in hand, Ellie crawled into the passage, her heart racing with anticipation. The tunnel led her to an underground chamber, its walls shimmering with crystals that reflected the lantern's light. At the center of the chamber was a stone pedestal holding an ancient book. The book's cover was adorned with symbols similar to those on the orb and the lantern. As Ellie opened it, the whispers grew louder, forming a single-word destiny. She realized this book held the secrets of Blackwood Forest and her role as its protector. Ellie carefully turned the delicate pages of the book, each filled with strange markings and illustrations of the forest's history. She learned that the forest was once a sanctuary for magical creatures, and that the guardian was a mortal who sacrificed their life to protect it from invaders. The orb, lantern, and pedestal were part of an ancient ritual to keep the forest alive. However, the book also warned of a prophecy: when greed awakens, the shadows will rise again. Ellie understood that while the forest was healing, its future depended on the balance between humans and nature. Determined to honor her responsibility, she took the book and returned to the surface, feeling the weight of its knowledge. Despite Ellie's efforts, whispers of the forest's treasures began to spread beyond Ravenwood. Strangers arrived in the village, asking questions and offering gold in exchange for information about Blackwood Forest. The villagers, once hesitant, were now tempted by the promise of wealth. Ellie felt the tension growing, as the forest seemed to sense the impending danger. One night, the shadows in the forest began to shift unnaturally. The guardian appeared to Ellie, its form weaker and flickering. "The balance is breaking," it warned. "If they disturb the forest's heart, the shadows will consume all." Ellie knew she had to act quickly to protect the forest and prevent the prophecy from coming true. Ellie called a meeting in the village square, pleading with the villagers to resist the outsiders' offers. "The forest is more than just a place," she said passionately. "It's alive, and it will fight back if it's threatened." Some villagers supported her, but others, blinded by greed, dismissed her warnings. The division grew, and Ellie felt the weight of her task more than ever. That night, a group of strangers ventured into the forest, armed with axes and shovels. Ellie followed them, her heart pounding. As they began to dig near the ancient tree, the ground trembled, and the shadows erupted in a frenzy. The whispers turned into a deafening roar, and the strangers fled in terror. Ellie stood her ground, knowing the forest was testing her resolve. The guardian appeared before Ellie, its form barely visible. "The forest is at its breaking point," it said. "You must prove your loyalty won last time the ground split open, revealing a chasm filled with swirling shadows." Ellie was instructed to descend into the darkness and retrieve the forest's core, a glowing crystal that had been hidden for centuries. Summoning all her courage, Ellie climbed into the chasm. The shadows surrounded her, whispering doubts and fears, but she focused on the faint light at the bottom. When she reached the core, she felt its warmth and power. As she held it up, the shadows recoiled and the whispers turned into a harmonious song. Ellie climbed back, exhausted but triumphant. With the core restored to its rightful place beneath the ancient tree, the forest's transformation was complete. The shadows became part of the light, and the whispers turned into a soothing melody that echoed throughout the woods. The guardian, now fully restored, stood tall and proud. "You have saved us," it said, its voice filled with gratitude. The villagers who had doubted Ellie finally saw the forest's true beauty and pledged to protect it. The strangers left Ravenwood, deterred by the forest's mysterious power. Ellie, now a legend among her people, continued to care for Blackwood Forest, knowing its secrets and magic would endure for generations. As she walked through the vibrant woods, she felt a deep sense of peace, knowing the forest was safe in her hands. Months passed, and the forest flourished under Ellie's protection. The trees were greener, the streams clearer, and the air hummed with life. Villagers now visited the edges of the forest, leaving small offerings of flowers and fruit to show their respect. Ellie often wandered through the woods, feeling a deep connection to its heart. But she remained vigilant, knowing that peace could be fragile. One day, as Ellie walked near the grove, she noticed something strange. A faint, silvery mist hung low over the ground, moving as though alive. The whispers returned, this time carrying a message the forest's strength will soon be tested. Ellie's heart sank. She knew the forest had enemies beyond those she could see, and its magic was a force others would seek to control. A new visitor arrived in Ravenwood, a mysterious traveler dressed in dark robes, their face hidden beneath a hood. They claimed to be a historian, seeking knowledge about Blackwood Forest. The villagers, still wary of outsiders, directed the traveler to Ellie. When they met, the traveler spoke in riddles, hinting at ancient powers and forgotten dangers. "The forest holds more than just beauty," the traveler said. "It guards secrets that some would destroy to possess." Ellie listened carefully, her instincts telling her this person spoke the truth. Before leaving, the traveler handed Ellie a map marked with symbols she had seen in the ancient book. "Follow this if you wish to understand what lies ahead," they said, vanishing into the night. Ellie followed the map into an uncharted part of the forest. The terrain grew rugged, the trees older and taller. She found herself in a secluded valley where the air was thick with magic. At the center of the valley stood an ancient stone structure, its walls covered in carvings of creatures Ellie had only read about. The whispers guided her inside, where she discovered a glowing pool surrounded by runes. As she approached the pool, it began to shimmer, revealing visions of the forest's past and future. Ellie saw the guardians who came before her, their struggles and their victories. But she also saw a shadowed figure, its hands reaching for the forest's heart. The vision faded, leaving Ellie shaken but determined. She knew the sanctuary held the answers she needed to protect the forest. The pool's whispers grew louder, forming words Ellie could understand. The forest is alive, bound by the balance of light and shadow, they said. Its power can heal or destroy, depending on the hands that wield it. Ellie realized the forest's magic was both its strength and its vulnerability. She vowed to ensure it would never fall into the wrong hands. Before leaving the sanctuary, Ellie noticed an inscription on the wall. It read, "Only a heart free of greed and fear can unlock the forest's ultimate gift." Ellie felt a sense of responsibility heavier than ever. The whispers faded, replaced by a comforting silence, as if the forest trusted her to carry out her mission. As Ellie made her way back to the village, she sensed a change in the air. The shadows, once peaceful, now moved erratically, and the forest felt uneasy. That night, the guardian appeared, its glow dimmed. "A great darkness approaches," it warned. "The balance is tipping, and you must act swiftly." Ellie knew the shadowed figure from her vision was drawing closer. Determined to protect the forest, Ellie called upon the villagers for help. Though hesitant, many agreed to stand with her, their fear replaced by a newfound respect for the forest. Together, they prepared to defend the woods, not with weapons, but with their unity and belief in its magic. The shadowed figure arrived on a stormy night, cloaked in darkness and wielding a staff that seemed to absorb light. It sought the heart of the forest, its voice echoing with malice. "This power does not belong to you," Ellie said, stepping forward. The guardian appeared beside her, its light defiant against the encroaching shadow. A battle of will ensued, the forest itself joining the fight. The trees bent protectively around Ellie, and the whispers turned into a thunderous chant. With her courage and the villagers' support, Ellie channeled the forest's magic. Light and shadow clashed, and after a blinding flash, the figure vanished, defeated by the forest's strength and Ellie's unwavering spirit. As dawn broke, the forest stood in peaceful silence, its harmony restored once more. The villagers, now united in their reverence for Blackwood, celebrated Ellie's bravery. The guardian, now radiant, thanked her. "The forest's light shines because of you," it said. Ellie smiled, knowing the whispers of Blackwood Forest would tell this story for generations. After the shadowed figure's defeat, the forest came alive with joy. Trees swayed as though dancing, streams sparkled brighter than ever, and the air hummed with a melody only Ellie could truly hear. The villagers gathered at the forest's edge to celebrate the victory, leaving offerings of fruit, flowers, and handcrafted items as thanks to the guardian and Ellie. Ellie stood beneath the ancient tree, feeling the warmth of the orb and the whispers filled with gratitude. "You have restored us," the guardian said, its voice filled with peace. "But remember, balance is fragile. Protect it always." Ellie vowed to keep the forest safe, its magic a gift to be cherished, not exploited. The days that followed were filled with harmony. The villagers worked with Ellie to establish boundaries for the forest, ensuring no one would harm its delicate balance. They built small wooden markers to remind future generations of the forest's importance. Children visited Ellie often, enchanted by her stories of the guardian and the shadows she had faced. One evening, Ellie returned to the sanctuary in the hidden valley. The pool shimmered once more, showing her visions of a brighter future. She saw the forest thriving, the whispers guiding others as they had guided her. The inscription glowed softly, affirming that Ellie's heart remained free of greed and fear. She felt at peace, knowing her role was secure. Just when Ellie thought the danger had passed, the whispers returned with a warning. Not all shadows have vanished, they said. Deep within the forest, an unfamiliar presence stirred. Though it wasn't as malevolent as the shadowed figure, it was curious and unpredictable. The guardian urged Ellie to investigate, and she prepared herself for another challenge. Ellie ventured into a remote part of the forest she had never explored. The trees there were ancient and twisted, and the whispers seemed to grow faint. At last, she came upon a clearing where a strange creature with glowing eyes stood. It wasn't hostile but seemed wary of Ellie. She extended her hand, hoping to earn its trust. The creature, a fox-like being with shimmering fur, introduced itself through the whispers. "I am a keeper of the shadows," it said. I was drawn here by the disturbance. Ellie realized the creature wasn't an enemy, but a guardian of the shadow realm, tasked with maintaining its own balance. The keeper warned Ellie that while the forest was safe for now, the boundary between light and shadow had weakened during the battle. If either side became too dominant, the balance would shatter. Ellie promised to work with the keeper to ensure harmony. They sealed their alliance beneath the ancient tree, where light and shadow intertwined in a beautiful dance. With the keeper by her side, Ellie gained new insights into the forest's magic. The shadows, once feared, were revealed to be as essential as the light. Together, they balanced the energy of the orb, ensuring the forest's stability. The villagers, initially wary of the keeper, soon came to accept it as part of the forest's mysterious charm. Ellie began to teach the villagers about the importance of balance, sharing what she had learned. The younger generation, especially, embraced the idea, eager to protect the forest for years to come. Ellie felt proud, knowing the forest's future was in capable hands. Years passed, and Ellie continued to serve as the forest's guardian. The keeper became her constant companion, and their bond grew stronger with time. Together, they safeguarded the forest's secrets, ensuring its whispers carried tales of peace and wonder. The villagers lived in harmony with the forest, their lives enriched by its presence. One quiet evening, as Ellie sat beneath the ancient tree, the guardian appeared one final time. "Your work has ensured our survival," it said, its voice warm with gratitude. "The forest will remember you forever." Ellie smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. As the sun set over Blackwood Forest, its whispers echoed with her name, a symbol of light and shadow united in eternal harmony. As Ellie sat under the ancient tree, she felt a sudden warmth wrap around her, as though the forest itself was embracing her. The guardian appeared once more, glowing brightly against the backdrop of twilight. "You have protected the balance," Elliot said softly. "Now the forest offers you its final gift." The guardian placed a glowing orb in her hands. It was light yet pulsed with ancient power, its core filled with the energy of the forest. "This is the essence of Blackwood," the guardian explained. "With it you will always be connected to the forest, and its whispers will guide you forever." Ellie felt the orb hum with life, knowing that this gift was a bond stronger than anything else. Ellie's heart swelled with gratitude as she gazed at the orb. With it, she could feel the heartbeat of the forest beneath her fingertips. The whispers, once distant and faint, now spoke clearly in her mind, as if they were an eternal part of her. She knew her role as the guardian was complete, but the forest's magic would never leave her. That night, as Ellie stood on the edge of Blackwood, she felt a peace that she had never known before. The stars above seemed to shine brighter, and the moon illuminated the path back to the village. The trees whispered softly, no longer filled with fear or warning, but with hope. The forest had truly found its harmony. Years later, Ellie began to feel the pull of time. She was no longer as young as she once was, and the forest had changed. Its magic was now woven into the very fabric of the village, and it was clear that a new generation would need to step forward. Ellie began to teach the young ones, sharing everything she had learned about balance, light, and shadow. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ellie called upon the village's children. They gathered around her, eager to hear her stories. "The time has come for you to become the new protectors," she said, passing the orb to the eldest among them. "You will carry the forest's whispers and protect its magic. The future is in your hands now." The children accepted the orb with reverence, ready to take on the responsibility. The village and the forest flourished under the care of the new guardians. Ellie, though no longer the sole protector, continued to live among them, offering wisdom whenever it was needed. The once silent whispers of the forest now filled the hearts of the villagers, guiding them as they worked, played, and lived in harmony with nature. As the seasons passed, the forest began to reveal even more wonders. New creatures emerged, and the balance of light and shadow remained steady. Ellie knew her work had paved the way for a future where the forest would never be forgotten, and its whispers would continue to be heard for generations. On her final night in the forest, Ellie stood once more beneath the ancient tree. The guardian appeared by her side, its light soft but powerful. "You have completed your journey," Elliot said. "The forest is safe, and its magic will endure. Your name will be remembered for all time." Ellie smiled, feeling the weight of the forest's love and gratitude. She had given everything to protect it, and in return, the forest had given her a life filled with meaning and purpose. As the wind whispered through the leaves, Ellie knew that the whispers would never fade. They would continue, carried on the winds of time, forever a part of Blackwood. The next morning, Ellie walked away from the forest for the last time. Her heart was at peace, knowing she had fulfilled her duty. The villagers saw her off with smiles and tears, grateful for the wisdom she had shared. As she left the forest behind, she turned one last time to see the trees swaying gently, as if waving goodbye. Ellie's journey had come to an end, but the legacy of Blackwood Forest lived on in the hearts of those who believed in its magic. The whispers, once a mysterious force, had become a guide to the future. And as Ellie faded into the horizon, the forest's voice echoed in the distance, a promise that it would never be forgotten. As time passed, the guardianship of Blackwood Forest continued, but Ellie's heart knew a sense of contentment she hadn't felt before. The forest thrived under the care of the new protectors, but there were still moments when she could hear the whispers calling her, reminding her of her deep connection with the forest. One evening, as she walked through the village, the wind carried a soft melody, one she recognized immediately. It was the voice of the ancient tree, the heart of Blackwood. The whispers spoke to her once more, not with urgency or danger, but with love. "You are forever a part of us, Ellie," they whispered. The connection between her and the forest would never fade. That night, as Ellie lay in her bed, she dreamt of Blackwood Forest. She saw the trees reaching toward the sky, their branches intertwined in an unbreakable bond. The streams sparkled with life, and the animals roamed freely, their spirits connected to the earth. In her dream, the guardian appeared, its light glowing softly in the mist. "You have been our heart," Ellie the guardian spoke, Your dreams have shaped the future of Blackwood, and now you will always be with us." Ellie awoke with a deep sense of peace, knowing that the forest would continue to flourish. Years passed, and the village became a symbol of harmony between nature and humankind. The villagers cared for the forest, ensuring its magic remained untouched. Ellie, though no longer a young woman, continued to visit the forest, her bond with it growing stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, as she walked to the edge of Blackwood, she met the newest generation of guardians, young and eager to protect the forest. They approached her with respect, their eyes filled with wonder. Ellie smiled, knowing that the forest's whispers would live on through them. The circle of life continued, and Blackwood would remain a safe haven for generations to come. Ellie's story became one told around the village fires, passed down through generations. The legend of the girl who protected Blackwood Forest was shared with the young ones, inspiring them to cherish and protect the world around them. The forest remained a place of wonder, mystery, and magic, a reminder of the delicate balance between light and shadow. And though Ellie no longer walked the forest paths as its guardian, her legacy lived on in the hearts of those who believed. The whispering shadows continued, and they would forever carry her name, a reminder that one person's dedication could shape the fate of an entire world. One peaceful evening, as the sun began to set, Ellie stood by the forest one last time. The whispers, though quiet, filled her heart. "You have given us everything, Ellie," they said. "Your spirit is here, in the roots of the trees, in the wind that carries our secrets, in every shadow that dances under the moonlight." With a gentle smile, Ellie whispered back, "I will always be with you." She took one final look at the forest, knowing that it was in safe hands. As she walked away, the whispers followed her, a soft, eternal melody carrying her spirit forever through the trees and the winds of Blackwood. The village remained a place of peace, its connection to the forest strong and unbroken. The guardianship of Blackwood passed from one generation to the next, each protector carrying the whispers with them, ensuring that the magic of the forest would never be lost. Ellie's name became more than just a memory. It became a part of Blackwood's essence, a timeless whisper in the winds, in the rustling leaves, and in the hearts of those who loved the forest. The forest itself, with its secrets and shadows, would always remember the girl who saved it, and the whispers of Blackwood would never fade, echoing forever through the ages. As seasons changed, the villagers felt a subtle shift in the air. The winds grew colder, and the shadows in the forest seemed to stretch longer. It was on one such evening that young Lily, the new guardian, heard a strange sound in the distance, a soft whisper calling her name. The forest had been quiet for so long, and now it seemed to stir once more. Lily followed the whispers through the trees, feeling both fear and curiosity swirling within her. The path ahead grew darker, and the whispers grew louder, urging her to keep going. "Do not fear, young guardian," the voices whispered. "We are with you with each step." Lily felt herself becoming more connected to the forest, more aware of its ancient energy. Lily's journey led her to a hidden part of Blackwood, one she had never seen before. The trees here were older, their trunks thick with moss and their roots tangled deeply in the earth. The air was thick with mystery, and Lily could feel the weight of time pressing down on her. The whispers seemed to echo from every direction, urging her to find the heart of the forest. As Lily ventured deeper, she stumbled upon a forgotten path, covered in leaves and vines. The forest had hidden it for years, but now it seemed to reveal itself to her. With a sense of purpose, she began to follow the path, knowing that it would lead her to something important. The whispers were clearer now, guiding her every step. At the end of the path, Lily discovered the heart of Blackwood, a large, ancient tree that seemed to glow with an inner light. Its bark shimmered with an ethereal glow, and its branches reached toward the sky like arms welcoming her. The whispers that had guided her here grew silent as she approached. In its place, a calm, warm voice spoke from the tree itself. "You have come," Lily the tree said. "You are the new guardian, the one chosen to protect the balance." Lily placed her hand on the tree's glowing bark, feeling its ancient power flow through her. She knew that this moment was the culmination of everything she had learned, everything she had been prepared for. The bond between her and the forest was now unbreakable. Lily returned to the village with the knowledge that the forest had accepted her as its protector. The whispers, once only a faint sound, now filled her mind, guiding her in every decision she made. She understood the delicate balance between the village and the forest, knowing that it was her responsibility to ensure it was maintained. The villagers saw the change in her. Her connection to the forest was now visible, as if a part of her had become one with it. As Lily walked through the village, the wind seemed to follow her, and the trees swayed in a way that felt almost like a greeting. The forest, once mysterious and full of secrets, now seemed open to those who respected it. Years passed, and Lily became known as the guardian of Blackwood. Under her protection, the forest flourished and the village prospered. The bond between them grew stronger, and the whispers, once only heard by the guardians, were now understood by all. The villagers learned to listen, to respect, and to live in harmony with the forest's magic. But as time went on, Lily felt the pull of the forest growing stronger. She knew that her journey, too, would one day come to an end. The whispers began to speak to her once more, not with urgency, but with a quiet, comforting presence. "Your time as guardian is ending," they whispered. "It is time for the next to step forward." One final evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Lily stood beneath the ancient tree once more. The whispers had come full circle, telling her that the time had come to pass on the mantle of guardianship. She called the village together, her heart heavy with both pride and sadness. With great care, Lily passed on the glowing orb that had once been given to her, the symbol of Blackwood's power. The next guardian, a young girl named Maeve, took the orb with reverence, knowing that it carried the responsibility of the forest's future. As Lily stepped back, she felt the whispers of the forest surround her one last time. They weren't goodbye, but a promise the forest would always remember, and the whispers would live on forever. And so, with the passing of the torch, the legacy of Blackwood continued, its whispers now guiding the new generation, ensuring that the magic of the forest would endure for all time. As the years passed, Maeve, the new guardian, embraced her role with the wisdom passed down from Lily. She had heard stories of how the forest once whispered to its protectors, and now she felt its presence in every rustle of the leaves, every breeze that brushed against her skin. The forest, alive with history and magic, now rested gently in her care. The whispers that once called Lily's name now spoke to Maeve, soft and constant. "You are one of us," they whispered. Maeve often found herself standing in the heart of Blackwood, listening to the deep, comforting voice of the forest. It was no longer just a place, it had become a living entity, and she was its voice. The bond was complete, and Maeve knew that she was destined to walk with the forest for as long as it existed. One quiet evening, as Maeve wandered deeper into the woods, she stumbled upon something she had never seen before, an old, forgotten stone with strange markings. It seemed to hum with energy, as if it had a story to tell. The whispers grew louder, guiding her to the stone. Maeve knelt beside it and traced her fingers over the ancient carvings. The markings told of an ancient power hidden deep within the forest, a power that had been forgotten by all but the oldest trees. The whispers spoke of it, but only the chosen guardian could unlock its secrets. Maeve knew that her journey was far from over, and that her connection to the forest had just begun to reveal its full depth. The whispers warned Maeve of a test that lay ahead. The shadows of Blackwood were not just whispers, they were remnants of the past, of guardians who had come before. These shadows would challenge her, testing her strength, wisdom, and resolve. One moonlit night, as the wind howled through the trees, Maeve stood at the stone. The shadows emerged, swirling around her. They were not enemies but guardians of ancient knowledge. Their voices were as old as the forest itself, each whispering secrets that Maeve had to decipher. The trial was not one of force but of heart. To pass, she had to prove that her heart was pure and her intentions true. The shadows took on different forms, shifting and moving with purpose. Maeve faced her fears, each shadow representing a different challenge: doubt, loneliness, and fear of failure. But she stood firm, knowing that the whispers of the forest guided her. As the shadows grew darker and more intense, Maeve felt a surge of warmth. The forest was with her, its power flowing through her veins. With every whisper, she grew stronger, more confident. She knew that she had passed the trial, for the shadows no longer sought to test her, but to welcome her into their ancient fold. Maeve had become one with the very essence of Blackwood. When the trial ended, Maeve stood alone in the heart of the forest, surrounded by an aura of light. The whispers faded into a profound silence, as if waiting for something. Then, the voice of the ancient tree, the heart of Blackwood, spoke once more. "Maeve, you have proven yourself worthy." The tree's voice resonated. "The power of the forest now flows through you, and the whispers you hear are not just guidance, they are the legacy of those who came before you. You are now the eternal guardian of Blackwood." Maeve's heart swelled with pride, but also with a deep responsibility. She had not only protected Blackwood, but had become a part of it. She was its keeper, its heart, and its future. The whispers of the forest were now hers to carry forever. Years later, Blackwood continued to thrive under Maeve's guardianship. The village flourished, its people living in harmony with the forest. The whispers, once faint, were now part of everyday life. The villagers no longer feared the shadows of the forest but respected them, understanding that they were a living, breathing part of their world. As Maeve stood in the heart of Blackwood, watching the sun set behind the trees, she felt the whispers calm and the shadows soften. Her journey had brought her to this moment, where she knew that Blackwood would continue to grow, to whisper, and to live long after her. The future of the forest was secure, and the legacy of the guardians would never fade. The whispers would always remain, as eternal as the trees themselves. As the years passed, Maeve's connection to Blackwood grew even deeper. She had learned the secrets of the forest, its rhythm, and its ancient ways. Yet, there was always something more, something hidden in the depths that even she had yet to uncover. On a quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Maeve noticed something unusual. The shadows, usually soft and comforting, seemed to be gathering more intensely. Standing at the edge of the forest, Maeve's heart raced as a figure emerged from the trees. It was not human, but something far older, something she had never seen before. The figure watched her silently, its form flickering like a shadow itself. Maeve felt a chill run down her spine. Who was this mysterious watcher, and what did it want from the forest? The figure slowly stepped forward, and Maeve could see more clearly. It was an ancient spirit, not seen for centuries, its body made of shadows and light. The whispers seemed to pause, their usual guidance replaced by a silence that was almost heavy. Maeve stood still, waiting for the spirit to speak, feeling an unspoken connection between them. A guardian of Blackwood, the spirit's voice was soft, like a distant breeze. The forest has flourished, but there is a deeper magic here, one that you have yet to discover. It is a magic that has been forgotten by all but a few. Maeve listened intently, her curiosity piqued. What was this hidden magic, and how would it change everything she knew about Blackwood? The spirit's words echoed in Maeve's mind as it led her to a part of Blackwood she had never ventured to before. The path was dark and overgrown, with vines wrapping around the trees like ancient tendrils. Maeve followed the spirit, her heart beating with anticipation and trepidation. The forest around her seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for something to happen. They reached a clearing, where a stone well stood, covered in moss and forgotten by time. The well was not like any Maeve had seen before. It was old, its stone cracked and weathered, yet it radiated an energy she could feel in her bones. The spirit stood beside the well and motioned for Maeve to approach. "This is the well of memories," it whispered. "It holds the power of those who have come before you." Maeve peered into the well, her reflection staring back at her. But as she looked deeper, she saw more than just her image. Faces from the past, guardians long gone, people who had once lived in the village, and spirits who had watched over the forest appeared in the water. Their eyes seemed to follow her, their presence a reminder of the many lives intertwined with the forest's fate. "This well holds the memories of all who have come before you," the spirit said. "It is a source of great power, but also great responsibility. By gazing into it, you accept the knowledge of the past and the future. Are you ready to take this burden?" Maeve nodded solemnly, knowing that she had no choice. This was the next step in her journey as the guardian. As Maeve gazed deeper into the well, the memories flooded her mind. She saw the first guardians, who had made Blackwood what it was today. She saw the struggles they faced, the balance they had to maintain between the village and the forest, and the dark forces that had tried to destroy it. She felt their fears, their hopes, and their strength. The weight of their collective knowledge pressed heavily on her, but she understood that this was now part of her. The whispers grew louder in her ears, now filled with the voices of those who had gone before. "You are the keeper of our memories, Maeve," they whispered. "You are the bridge between the past and the future. The forest will always whisper to you, but now you must listen with wisdom." Maeve closed her eyes, taking in the vast knowledge, feeling the burden and the honor that came with it. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, Maeve stepped away from the well, her heart full of new understanding. She now held the memories of Blackwood, the knowledge of its past, and the wisdom of its guardians. The forest, once mysterious and full of secrets, was now open to her in ways she could never have imagined. The spirit smiled, its form beginning to fade into the shadows. "You are ready now, Maeve," it said softly. "The whispers of the forest are yours to guide, and the magic within Blackwood will flourish under your care." Maeve stood tall, knowing that her journey had only just begun. The future of Blackwood was in her hands, and the whispers would always be with her, guiding her through the shadows and into the light. As Maeve took her first steps into her new role, the forest seemed to shift around her. The trees, ancient and wise, whispered softly to her, guiding her along a path she had never noticed before. The night had fallen, and under the moon's gentle glow, the forest looked different, alive, but with a quiet, almost secretive energy. Maeve followed the path, trusting the whispers to lead her where she needed to go. The path grew narrow, winding through thick underbrush and towering trees. Every step she took felt as though it was pulling her deeper into the heart of the forest. The air was thick with mystery, and Maeve couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. She had walked these woods countless times, but tonight they seemed to hold more secrets than ever before. The whispers grew louder, urging her onward, telling her that this was a journey only she could complete. As she continued along the moonlit path, Maeve came to a clearing that felt strangely familiar. The ground was covered with soft moss, and in the center stood an ancient stone altar, worn by time but still standing strong. The whispers became clearer now, and Maeve realized that the forest was leading her to a place of great importance, one that had been forgotten by all but the oldest trees. This is the place, the whispers seemed to say. The ritual must be performed here. To renew the forest's strength, Maeve understood the gravity of the moment. She had read of such rituals in the ancient texts passed down by the old guardians, but she had never imagined she would be the one to perform them. With a steady breath, she approached the altar, feeling the weight of the forest's power gathering around her. The stone altar shimmered with a faint, ethereal light as Maeve knelt before it. The air around her seemed to thicken, and she could hear faint whispers in the wind. The spirits of the forest, ancient and wise, were gathering, drawn by the ritual she was about to perform. Maeve closed her eyes, raising her hands to the sky as she began to chant the ancient words. The spirits answered her call, their voices blending with the whispers of the forest. The wind picked up, swirling around her as the forest seemed to come alive with energy. Maeve felt the presence of the past guardians, their spirits surrounding her, watching over her. She was not alone. With each word she spoke, the ritual began to take hold, restoring balance and strength to Blackwood, renewing the bond between the forest and its guardian. As Maeve completed the final words of the ritual, a deep, resounding hum echoed through the forest. The ground beneath her feet seemed to pulse with energy, as if Blackwood itself was awakening. The trees swayed gently, their leaves shimmering in the moonlight, as if they were alive with new vitality. Maeve felt a deep connection to the forest. Its heartbeat was now her own. The whispers softened, now a calming presence that surrounded her. "You have done it," they said, their voices filled with gratitude. "The forest is reborn. Its strength is yours to protect." Maeve stood, feeling the weight of the forest's power flowing through her. She had not only renewed the magic of Blackwood, but had strengthened the bond between herself and the ancient spirits that protected it. As Maeve stood in the center of the clearing, a new voice echoed in her mind, one that was both familiar and foreign. It was the voice of the forest's true guardian, the one who had first called Blackwood home. "Maeve," the voice said softly, "you have done well. But remember, there is always more to learn. The forest is vast, and its secrets are endless." Maeve nodded, understanding that her journey was far from over. There were still untold mysteries hidden within the forest, secrets that she would one day uncover. The forest had given her its trust, but it had also given her a promise to protect its legacy and continue the work of the guardians who had come before her. With the ritual complete and the forest now at peace, Maeve stood at the edge of the clearing, gazing into the depths of Blackwood. The whispers were gentle now, like a lullaby, soothing her spirit. She had earned her place as the guardian of the forest, and the bond between them was unbreakable. Maeve knew that the forest would always be with her, its secrets and power flowing through her veins. As the moon rose higher in the sky, casting its silver light over the trees, Maeve felt a sense of calm settle within her. The forest had found its protector, and Blackwood would endure for generations to come. The whispers, now a constant presence, would guide her forever, reminding her that she was not only the guardian of Blackwood but a part of it, forever bound to its ancient magic. Years passed, and Maeve grew into her role as the guardian of Blackwood. Yet something lingered in the shadows, an ancient presence that stirred whenever the night fell. The forest, ever watchful, seemed to hum with an unsettling energy on those dark nights. Maeve had heard tales from the older guardians, stories of the Night Stalker, a creature who roamed the forest in the dead of night, its presence a sign of imbalance. One evening, as the moon hung low in the sky, Maeve felt it, a cold breeze brushing past her, carrying with it an eerie silence. The whispers fell quiet, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Maeve's heart quickened, her instincts telling her that the Night Stalker was near. She turned, her eyes scanning the woods, but saw nothing. Yet the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. The next few nights were filled with unsettling occurrences. Maeve would hear strange noises in the distance, faint footsteps on the forest floor, and the rustling of branches as if something or someone was moving through the trees. The whispers, usually her constant guide, had grown faint, almost lost in the growing darkness. The forest, it seemed, was not entirely under her control. Determined to find the source, Maeve ventured deeper into the heart of Blackwood. The path was treacherous, the trees thick with vines that seemed to reach out like hands trying to stop her. Still, she pressed on, her heart steady despite the fear creeping in. The whispers warned her, "Beware the shadows, Maeve. They are not all who they appear to be," but Maeve couldn't turn back now. She had to uncover the truth. As Maeve reached the deepest part of Blackwood, the air grew thick and heavy, the shadows darker than she had ever seen. The whispering stopped completely, and the forest was unnervingly silent. She stood still, trying to make sense of the stillness, when suddenly, from the corner of her eye, she saw it, a pair of glowing eyes watching her from the darkness. The figure stepped into the light, revealing itself to be the Night Stalker. It was not a creature, but a shadow, a being made entirely of darkness, its form shifting like smoke, its eyes filled with ancient malice. Maeve could feel the weight of its presence, and for the first time she felt a deep fear. This was the force that had been lurking in the shadows, threatening the balance of the forest. The Night Stalker spoke in a voice that sounded like the wind rustling through dead leaves. "You think you can protect this forest, guardian?" it hissed. "You are but a puppet in a world older than you can imagine." The forest was not always a place of peace, and I am the remnants of the darkness that once ruled it. Maeve took a step back, the weight of its words sinking into her. The Night Stalker was not a creature of the present. It was a manifestation of an ancient betrayal, a being born from the darkest magic ever used to control Blackwood. Maeve realized that the forest's balance had been disturbed long before her time. This shadow had been waiting, feeding off the forgotten parts of Blackwood's past, and now it had returned to claim what it believed was rightfully its own. Maeve summoned the power of the forest, drawing on the memories of the ancient guardians who had once fought against this very evil. The trees around her began to sway, their roots digging deep into the earth, and the moonlight grew brighter, casting a silver glow over the clearing. The Night Stalker recoiled, its form flickering like a dying flame. "You cannot defeat me," it growled, its voice trembling with rage. "I am the darkness of Blackwood, and I will never leave." Maeve stood tall, her resolve stronger than ever. "You may be darkness, but I am the light," she replied, her voice steady. "And the light will always find a way to push you back into the shadows." With that, Maeve raised her arms to the sky, channeling the full strength of the forest. As Maeve's power surged, the very earth beneath her feet trembled. The trees groaned and the wind howled as Blackwood itself joined the battle. The Night Stalker screeched, its form twisting and warping as the light grew stronger. Maeve felt the power of the forest flowing through her, the combined strength of all its ancient spirits pushing the darkness back. The battle raged, but Maeve could feel the tide turning. The darkness, once so overwhelming, began to fade as the light grew brighter, purging the forest of the Night Stalker's presence. With one final surge of energy, Maeve summoned the forest's wrath, and the shadow vanished into the night, its screech echoing in the distance. As the forest settled back into peace, Maeve stood victorious, her breath heavy but steady. The forest had been saved once again, and Blackwood remained in balance for now. The clearing was eerily still after the Night Stalker had vanished. Maeve stood in the center, feeling the weight of the battle. The energy that had pulsed through her body now seemed to fade, leaving her exhausted. The trees, once alive with the force of the battle, now stood quietly, their branches swaying in the soft night breeze. The forest was peaceful again, but Maeve couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness hadn't been entirely vanquished. Her heart still raced as she looked around, her senses heightened. The whispering had not returned, and for the first time, Maeve felt truly alone in Blackwood. She couldn't help but wonder, had the Night Stalker been the only threat lurking in the shadows? Or had it been a warning, a sign that something far greater still awaited? As she turned to leave, Maeve knew her journey was far from over. Days passed, but the unsettling silence in Blackwood lingered. Maeve could no longer hear the whispers of the forest, and without them, she felt a void. She had always relied on the voices of the trees and the spirits of the guardians, but now it felt as though they were distant, unreachable. Blackwood had always been a place of connection, a living entity that communicated with its guardian. Now, it felt like an empty shell, waiting for something to return. In her solitude, Maeve reflected on the ancient guardians who had come before her. They, too, had faced challenges, dangers from within and from the outside, but they had never experienced the complete silence that now enveloped the forest. It was as if the forest itself was grieving, mourning the ancient betrayal that had awakened the Night Stalker. Maeve felt the weight of their legacy pressing on her shoulders. The burden of protecting Blackwood was hers, but the task had never seemed so heavy. One evening, as Maeve walked through the woods, she felt something tug at her heart, a strange pull, as if the forest itself was calling to her. The silence was broken by a distant, haunting sound. At first, it seemed like nothing more than the rustling of leaves, but then Maeve realized it was more. It was a voice, faint but familiar. She followed the sound, her steps quickening as the voice grew clearer. She ventured deeper into Blackwood, the trees growing denser, their branches intertwining above her like a canopy. The voice, now unmistakable, called her name. Maeve. Maeve, it was the voice of the forest's first guardian, the one who had walked these woods centuries ago. Maeve knew she had to follow the voice. There was something important hidden in the depths of Blackwood, something that had been waiting for her to discover. The voice led Maeve to a grove she had never seen before. It was a hidden part of the forest, shrouded in mist and darkness. The trees here were ancient, their trunks gnarled and twisted, and the air was thick with magic. Maeve could feel the power radiating from the ground beneath her feet. The whispers of the past filled the air, not as a warning, but as a welcome. In the center of the grove stood an enormous stone covered in moss and markings. Maeve approached it slowly, feeling a strange connection to it. As her hand touched the stone, the markings glowed faintly, and the whispers intensified. "This is where it began," the voice said. Maeve realized that this was the source of the forest's power, the heart of Blackwood. Here, the magic had been born, and here it could be renewed. Maeve knelt before the stone, feeling the energy pulse through her. The voice of the forest guardian spoke once more, its tone urgent. "The shadows you faced are not gone, Maeve. They are woven into the very fabric of Blackwood. The threads of darkness are entwined with the threads of light, and they must be separated." Maeve's mind raced. The Night Stalker had been a manifestation of this darkness, but now she understood it was not something that could be destroyed. It was a part of Blackwood, a necessary balance, but one that had grown too powerful. She had to find a way to separate the darkness from the light, to restore the balance without letting one overtake the other. The task was daunting, but Maeve knew that she could not walk away. She was the guardian now, and it was her responsibility to protect the forest, no matter the cost. With newfound determination, Maeve stood and surveyed the grove. The stone beneath her seemed to hum with energy, as if it recognized her resolve. The whispers of the past filled her ears, telling her that the path she now faced was one only a true guardian could walk. It would not be easy, but Maeve was ready to do whatever it took to save Blackwood. As she left the grove, Maeve could feel the weight of her duty more than ever. The path ahead was unclear, filled with dangers she could not yet comprehend. But the forest had chosen her, and she would face whatever lay ahead with the strength of the ancient guardians by her side. The shadows were still there, lurking in the corners of Blackwood, but Maeve was no longer afraid. She was the guardian now, and the forest was hers to protect. Maeve's steps echoed through the forest as she made her way back from the hidden grove. Her mind was filled with the knowledge that the forest was not as simple as she had once thought. The threads of darkness and light were deeply intertwined, and the struggle to maintain the balance was far from over. She had been chosen as Blackwood's guardian for a reason, but this responsibility felt heavier with every passing moment. The forest's whispers seemed to grow louder as she walked, guiding her back to the heart of Blackwood, where the spirit of the forest awaited her. As she reached the clearing near her home, a strange warmth filled the air. Maeve stopped in her tracks, feeling a presence she hadn't sensed in years. The warmth was familiar, almost like a gentle embrace. It was the spirit of the forest, the one that had protected Blackwood long before her time. It was waking, and Maeve felt its ancient power. Maeve, the voice whispered, "You must be ready for what comes next." The spirit appeared before her, a glowing figure made of light and mist. It radiated calmness and strength, and Maeve could feel its wisdom in every word. "The darkness that threatens Blackwood is not gone, Maeve. It sleeps, waiting for the right moment to strike again. But there is hope if you are willing to face it. The spirit's voice was both soothing and sorrowful, like a deep, forgotten memory. Maeve nodded, her heart filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "What must I do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. The spirit smiled softly. "You must find the source of shadows, the heart of the darkness. Only by separating the light from the shadow can you restore balance. But beware, Maeve, the journey will test your spirit and your strength." The journey to the source of shadows would not be easy. Maeve had heard stories of the ancient places in Blackwood, where the forest's power was at its strongest and its most dangerous. The path was not meant for humans, and those who had ventured there before had never returned. But Maeve knew that she could not fail. The future of Blackwood, and perhaps the world itself, depended on her success. The spirit's words echoed in her mind as she made preparations for the journey. She packed only the essentials: food, water, and a talisman given to her by the previous guardians. The talisman was said to have the power to protect her from the forest's darker forces. With a final look at her home, Maeve stepped into the forest once again, the whispers guiding her toward the heart of Blackwood. The deeper Maeve ventured into the forest, the darker and colder it became. The trees twisted and turned, their branches clawing at the sky, as if trying to keep her from her destination. The air grew thick with an unnatural fog, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. Maeve's senses were on high alert. She could feel the presence of something watching her from the shadows, but she couldn't see it. The whispers had gone silent, replaced by a low, ominous hum that vibrated through the earth beneath her feet. Despite the fear gnawing at her, Maeve pressed forward. She had come too far to turn back now. The source of shadows was close, she could feel it. The forest seemed to be closing in on her, but she kept her focus, her heart steady. The darkness might be closing in, but she was ready to face it head-on. As Maeve moved deeper into the forest, the fog grew thicker, almost suffocating. The once familiar path had disappeared, replaced by twisted roots and jagged rocks. She stumbled, her breath quickening as the shadows seemed to grow longer and darker. Suddenly, a cold hand gripped her ankle, and Maeve yelped in surprise. She looked down to see a shadowy figure emerging from the ground, its form dark and fluid. The figure pulled at her, its grip tightening with every struggle. Maeve's heart raced, but she fought back, using the talisman to push the darkness away. Light radiated from the amulet, pushing the shadow back into the earth, but only for a moment. The shadow hissed, its voice filled with rage. "You cannot escape," it whispered. "The source of shadows is mine to protect." With the shadow retreating, Maeve continued her journey, her determination stronger than ever. As she reached the center of the forest, she finally saw it, the source of shadows. It was a massive, dark tree, its bark black as night and its roots deep within the earth. The tree pulsed with an ancient, malevolent energy. The air around it crackled with power, and Maeve could feel the darkness emanating from its core. Maeve approached the tree, her heart heavy with the knowledge that this was where the true battle would take place. The spirit's warning echoed in her mind. The darkness sleeps, but only for now. You must separate the light from the shadow, Maeve, or the balance will be lost forever. Maeve took a deep breath and placed her hand on the tree's blackened bark. The tree shuddered beneath her touch, and the darkness within stirred. The battle for Blackwood had only just begun. As Maeve touched the tree's bark, the air around her grew heavy. The once peaceful forest was now alive with a dark energy that seemed to pulse with every beat of her heart. The tree's roots shifted, and the shadows within it stretched toward her, whispering words that made her skin crawl. "You are too late," the shadows murmured, their voices layered and distant. "The source has already begun to awaken." The ground beneath Maeve's feet trembled as the tree's energy seeped into the very air she breathed. She knew that if she failed here, Blackwood would fall under the tree's curse. The darkness was growing stronger, and Maeve's only hope was to find the light hidden within this cursed place. She closed her eyes, focusing on the talisman in her hand, and began to chant the ancient words taught to her by the guardians of the forest. The talisman in Maeve's hand glowed softly, and with every word she spoke, the shadows recoiled. But the darkness was relentless, fighting back with all its might. The air was thick with tension as Maeve felt the battle for Blackwood unfold around her. The whispers grew louder, angry at being challenged. Yet Maeve's resolve remained unshaken. She called upon the light of the forest, the ancient power that had once kept the shadows at bay. Suddenly, a burst of light erupted from the talisman, filling the forest with a pure, radiant glow. The shadows hissed in fury, but the light spread, dissolving the darkness that had plagued the heart of Blackwood for so long. Maeve held her ground, her voice steady as she continued to chant, calling forth the strength of the forest's spirit. The tree began to shake violently, and the whispers of the shadows faded into silence. The darkness fought back with everything it had, but Maeve's determination was stronger. The light from the talisman grew brighter, expanding outward, pushing the shadows further into the depths of the forest. The ground cracked, and the air grew thick with power as the battle between light and shadow reached its peak. Maeve's heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to give up. With one final chant, Maeve called upon the very heart of Blackwood. A surge of energy erupted from the forest, wrapping around her like a protective shield. The tree trembled, and for a moment the shadows faltered. Maeve could feel the light within her, a force of nature that was stronger than the darkness. She reached out with all her power, and the tree let out a deafening roar. The shadows retreated, their grip on Blackwood broken. As the last of the shadows vanished into the earth, the forest fell silent. Maeve stood in the clearing, breathing heavily, the light of the talisman slowly fading away. The tree that had once pulsed with dark energy now stood still and lifeless, its bark returning to its natural brown hue. The air was no longer thick with tension, and the oppressive weight that had hung over Blackwood for so long was finally gone. Maeve looked around, her heart swelling with relief. The battle had been won, but she knew that this peace was fragile. The forest would need time to heal, and she would need to remain vigilant. The darkness had been driven back, but it would always be a threat, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next chance to return. Still, for now, Blackwood was safe, and that was enough. As Maeve turned to leave the clearing, a soft voice filled the air. "You have done it." Maeve, the spirit of the forest, appeared before her, its light brighter than before. "You have saved Blackwood, but the journey does not end here." The spirit smiled, its presence calming Maeve's exhausted heart. "You are now the true guardian of this forest, and you will watch over it for as long as the forest grows." Maeve nodded, humbled by the spirit's words. She had been chosen, not just to fight the darkness, but to protect the balance of Blackwood forever. The responsibility was heavy, but Maeve knew she was ready. She had found her strength, not in the power of the light or the shadows, but in the balance between them. As Maeve walked away from the clearing, the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, casting golden light over the forest. The whispering shadows of Blackwood had been silenced. For now. Maeve knew that her journey as the Guardian was just beginning. There would always be challenges to face, but she would face them with the knowledge that the forest and its spirits were with her. Blackwood had been saved, and a new chapter in its story had begun. As Maeve walked deeper into the heart of Blackwood, she could feel the forest's energy pulsing through the air. The darkness had been driven away, but there was still an unsettled feeling that lingered in the trees. Suddenly, she felt a gentle tug on her sleeve. Looking down, Maeve saw a small creature, no larger than a rabbit, with shimmering golden fur. It had glowing eyes and a soft, inviting gaze. The creature nuzzled her hand, and she smiled, recognizing it as one of the forest's ancient guardians. The creature held out a small bundle wrapped in leaves. Maeve took it carefully, feeling the weight of something powerful within. When she unwrapped it, she found a crystal, clear and glowing softly with an inner light. The creature's eyes met hers, and the message was clear: this crystal was a gift from the forest, a symbol of her new role as its protector. Maeve could feel the strength and wisdom of the forest flowing through her as she held the crystal, understanding that she had not only defeated the darkness but had also become one with Blackwood itself. With the crystal in her hand, Maeve continued her journey through Blackwood, knowing that her task as guardian was far from over. As she walked, the forest seemed to shift around her. Trees that had once seemed familiar now appeared different, their branches twisting in ways she had never seen before. The whispers in the air had quieted, but Maeve could still sense the power of the forest surrounding her, guiding her forward. She soon discovered a hidden path, one that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The trees on either side parted as if welcoming her. Maeve hesitated for a moment, but then stepped forward, trusting the forest's guidance. The path was winding and narrow, but it seemed to pull her towards something important. She could feel the weight of destiny upon her shoulders as she walked, the crystal glowing brighter with each step. The journey ahead would be just as challenging as the last, but Maeve was ready. As Maeve ventured deeper into the hidden path, the air grew thick with a sense of ancient power. The ground beneath her feet was soft and moss-covered, and the trees seemed to be alive with energy. She reached a small clearing where the path ended in front of a circle of stones. In the center of the circle there was a large ancient tree, unlike any she had seen before. Its bark shimmered with a silver light, and its roots seemed to stretch into the very earth, connecting it to the heart of Blackwood itself. The guardians watched her with approval, and the crystal in her hand began to glow brightly. The spirit of the forest itself seemed to approve of her oath. With her oath spoken, Maeve felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. The guardians faded into the trees, their forms disappearing into the mist as if they had never been there. The ancient tree at the center of the circle stood still, its silver bark glowing softly in the twilight. Maeve stood for a moment, taking in the peacefulness of the forest around her. The battle was over, and Blackwood was safe once again. The darkness had been driven away, and the balance had been restored. Maeve looked down at the crystal in her hand, feeling the power of the forest flowing through it. It was a symbol of her new role, a reminder of the responsibility she carried. The forest had chosen her, and now she would protect it with all her heart. The whispers that had once filled the air had quieted, replaced by the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind. The forest was at peace once more, and Maeve knew that her work was just beginning. Maeve approached the tree slowly, the crystal in her hand pulsing with energy. As she neared the tree, the ground rumbled, and she felt a powerful presence awaken within the forest. The stone circle glowed softly, and one by one, the ancient guardians of Blackwood appeared around her. They were spirits of the forest, each taking the form of a different creature: a stag, a wolf, an owl, and many others. They stood silently, watching her with wise eyes. Maeve stood in the center of the circle, surrounded by the guardians of Blackwood. The spirits regarded her with deep respect, and she could feel their power surrounding her. The stag, the leader of the guardians, stepped forward and bowed its head. "You are the chosen one," Maeve said, its voice deep and resonant. "You have proven yourself worthy of the forest's trust. But your journey does not end here. The forest will always need a protector, and it is now your duty to watch over it, to ensure that the balance remains intact." Maeve nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of her new responsibility. "I swear to protect Blackwood, to honor its spirits, and to keep the balance between light and shadow," she vowed, her voice firm with determination. The guardians watched her with approval, and the crystal in her hand began to glow brightly. The spirit of the forest itself seemed to approve of her oath. With her oath spoken, Maeve felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. The guardians faded into the trees, their forms disappearing into the mist, as if they had never been there. The ancient tree at the center of the circle stood still, its silver bark glowing softly in the twilight. Maeve stood for a moment, taking in the peacefulness of the forest around her. The battle was over, and Blackwood was safe once again. The darkness had been driven away, and the balance had been restored. Maeve looked down at the crystal in her hand, feeling the power of the forest flowing through it. It was a symbol of her new role, a reminder of the responsibility she carried. The forest had chosen her, and now she would protect it with all her heart. The whispers that had once filled the air had quieted, replaced by the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind. The forest was at peace once more, and Maeve knew that her work was just beginning. The forest felt alive around her, the air thick with the promise of a new day. She stood up slowly, feeling the weight of her new responsibility, but also a deep peace within. The crystal in her hand pulsed gently, reminding her of her vow to protect Blackwood forever. With a deep breath, Maeve turned her gaze towards the horizon, where the first rays of sunlight kissed the treetops. The world around her felt still, as though it too was awaiting her next move. She could sense the forest watching her, waiting for her to take the next step. Blackwood had been restored to peace, but there would always be new challenges ahead. Maeve knew that her journey was far from over, but for now she stood tall, ready to face whatever came next. As Maeve walked deeper into the heart of Blackwood, she began to sense something she had never noticed before: a hidden, unspoken energy in the air. It was a warmth, almost like the pulse of the earth itself, guiding her to a new part of the forest she had never explored. Her feet led her to a quiet glade, where the trees grew closer together, their branches intertwining in a perfect, natural arch. In the center of the glade stood an ancient stone pedestal, covered in moss and ivy. It seemed to hum with an unseen power. Maeve approached the pedestal carefully, her instincts telling her that this was another important place in Blackwood, one that needed her attention. As she reached out to touch the stone, the crystal in her hand began to glow more brightly. The energy in the air seemed to intensify, and the forest around her seemed to hold its breath. Maeve's fingers brushed against the stone, and in that instant she felt a surge of energy course through her. a deeper connection to the forest than she had ever known. It was as if the heart of Blackwood itself had accepted her, and she was now a part of it in ways that went beyond her role as its protector. After the surge of energy faded, Maeve stood for a moment, absorbing the newfound connection. But as she did, a faint whisper drifted through the trees. It was so soft, so faint, that Maeve almost thought it was just the wind. But then, she heard it again, clearer this time. The whisper wasn't just from the forest, it was a voice, one that sounded both familiar and foreign at the same time. It called her name, a sound that echoed deep within her soul. Maeve, it whispered. Maeve, remember. Maeve felt a shiver run down her spine as the whisper grew louder, filling the space around her. The voice seemed to come from all directions, but it was unclear where it was truly coming from. The forest had always whispered, but this voice felt different, urgent, like a forgotten memory trying to resurface. Maeve closed her eyes, trying to listen more carefully, but the voice faded as quickly as it had appeared. Maeve stood still, her mind racing as the whispers faded into silence. What had just happened? The forest had always been full of mysterious sounds, but this was different. The voice seemed to be calling her to remember something important. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the forest's story than she had been told. Determined to find answers, Maeve set out to uncover the truth behind the mysterious whisper. She retraced her steps through Blackwood, revisiting places she had already explored, hoping to find a clue, a sign that would reveal the meaning behind the voice. But as the day wore on, the whispers remained absent, leaving Maeve with only questions. What was the forest trying to tell her? And why had it chosen now to speak to her in this way? As Maeve walked through the forest once more, she could feel the presence of the ancient spirits watching her, guiding her towards something important. The whisper had been the key, unlocking a piece of her past that she had not known existed. The forest was not just a place she protected, it was a part of her, and she was a part of it. The journey to uncover the full truth of her connection to Blackwood had only just begun. Maeve's heart raced as she ventured deeper into Blackwood, guided by the echo of her newfound memories. The whisper had stopped, but the pull of something hidden deep in the forest was undeniable. She moved through the trees, her senses heightened, aware of every rustle of leaves, every gust of wind. The forest seemed to shift around her, as if it were watching, waiting for her to uncover the truth. As she walked, she noticed a path she had never seen before, partially hidden by thick undergrowth and ancient vines. It was faint, but unmistakably there. She hesitated for a moment, uncertainty creeping in. This path felt different from the others, as though it was meant to be found only by those who truly belonged to the forest. As night fell, Maeve found herself once again at the edge of the ancient tree where the guardians had once appeared. The forest seemed quiet, but a strange sense of anticipation hung in the air. She sat down beneath the tree, the crystal resting in her palm, trying to quiet her mind. She closed her eyes and let the sounds of the forest wash over her, hoping to hear the whisper again. Suddenly, the whisper returned, but this time it was not just a voice, it was a memory. Maeve saw flashes of images in her mind, a battle long ago, the forest shrouded in darkness, and a figure that looked strikingly like herself, standing at the heart of Blackwood. The memory was fragmented, pieces of a story that Maeve couldn't quite understand, but one thing was clear: she was connected to the forest in ways she hadn't realized before. This memory was part of her own past, a past hidden deep within the forest's shadows. With the memory fresh in her mind, Maeve stood up, feeling a new sense of purpose. She had learned that her connection to Blackwood went beyond her role as its guardian. It was something deeper, something tied to her very soul. The past was not lost to the forest, it was waiting to be uncovered. As Maeve walked through the forest once more, she could feel the presence of the ancient spirits watching her, guiding her towards something important. The whisper had been the key, unlocking a piece of her past that she had not known existed. The forest was not just a place she protected, it was a part of her, and she was a part of it. The journey to uncover the full truth of her connection to Blackwood had only just begun. Maeve's heart raced as she ventured deeper into Blackwood, guided by the echo of her newfound memories. The whisper had stopped, but the pull of something hidden deep in the forest was undeniable. She moved through the trees, her senses heightened, aware of every rustle of leaves, every gust of wind. The forest seemed to shift around her, as if it were watching, waiting for her to uncover the truth. As she walked, she noticed a path she had never seen before, partially hidden by thick undergrowth and ancient vines. It was faint, but unmistakably there. She hesitated for a moment, uncertainty creeping in. This path felt different from the others, as though it was meant to be found only by those who truly belonged to the forest. Maeve knew she had to follow it, but the weight of the forest's ancient secrets made her question what lay ahead. With a deep breath, she stepped onto the hidden path, the ground soft beneath her feet, and the air thick with anticipation. She could feel that this was the beginning of something that would change everything. The further Maeve walked, the more the atmosphere around her changed. The trees grew taller, their trunks wider, and the shadows deepened, casting long, eerie figures across the ground. The path narrowed, becoming more overgrown as though it hadn't been used in centuries. Despite the darkness, Maeve pressed on, her steps guided by the crystal's soft glow. After a while, she reached a clearing where the trees opened up to reveal a massive stone archway. It was covered in moss and vines, and ancient symbols were carved into its surface. The archway seemed to pulse with an ancient power, drawing Maeve closer. As she stepped beneath it, she felt a tingling sensation on her skin, and the crystal in her hand began to glow brighter than ever before. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet shifted, and she stumbled forward, falling to her knees. The crystal in her hand flared, and in that instant, she saw a vision, a glimpse of the forest's ancient past. She saw the guardians, their faces full of wisdom and power, standing before the archway, each one marking their place in Blackwood's legacy. Maeve realized that this archway was the guardian's mark, a place of passage for those who were chosen to protect the forest's deepest secrets. Maeve rose to her feet, her mind racing with the newfound knowledge. She was standing in a place of great importance, a place that tied her to the very essence of Blackwood. As she stood beneath the arch, she could feel a faint vibration beneath her feet, like the heartbeat of the forest itself. It was subtle but strong, echoing through the earth and into her soul. She placed her hand on the stone archway, and the vibrations grew stronger, resonating with the crystal in her hand. The energy was overwhelming, and Maeve closed her eyes, letting the pulse of the forest fill her senses. It was as though the forest had come alive, its history and memories flowing into her. She could feel the presence of the guardians, their spirits watching over her, guiding her toward the next step of her journey. The heartbeat of Blackwood was not just a sound, it was the rhythm of life itself, a constant pulse that connected all things within the forest. Maeve realized that this connection was her legacy, and she was now a part of it, woven into the very fabric of Blackwood. As the energy began to settle, Maeve opened her eyes, only to see the shadows around her shift unnaturally. The trees seemed to bend and twist in the growing darkness, and the air grew heavy with a sense of foreboding. The forest, once alive with gentle whispers, now felt charged with something darker. Maeve's heart quickened as she noticed the shadows gathering at the edges of the clearing. Something was coming. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and the whisper returned, louder than before, but now it was filled with dread. Maeve. Beware, it echoed through the trees. Maeve could feel the darkness rising, an ancient force that had long been dormant in Blackwood. The heartbeat of the forest seemed to slow, its once steady rhythm now erratic, like the pulse of something waking from a long slumber. The guardians had warned her of a time when darkness would return to the forest, and now that time seemed to be upon her. In the distance, Maeve saw a figure emerge from the shadows. It was tall and cloaked, its face hidden beneath a hood. The figure moved silently, its presence almost suffocating in its intensity. Maeve's instincts told her to run, but she couldn't move. The figure stepped closer, and she could feel its gaze, cold and piercing, even though she couldn't see its eyes. Maeve, the figure spoke, its voice deep and filled with malice. "You have awakened what should have stayed asleep." Maeve's breath caught in her throat. This was no guardian, it was something far more dangerous. The figure raised a hand, and Maeve felt a dark energy surge toward her, threatening to consume her. But before the shadow could reach her, a burst of light erupted from the crystal in her hand, pushing the darkness back. The figure staggered, but it didn't retreat. Instead, it smiled, an eerie, twisted grin that sent a chill down Maeve's spine. "You cannot stop what is already set in motion," it hissed, before vanishing back into the shadows. Maeve stood frozen, the forest around her holding its breath. The battle between light and darkness was no longer a distant tale, it was happening now, and Maeve was at the center of it. The crystal in her hand had protected her, but she knew the darkness was far from defeated. The figure's words echoed in her mind. The forest's heartbeat, once steady, now seemed to quicken again, a sign of the coming storm. Maeve looked around the clearing, her thoughts racing. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: she had a choice. She could retreat, hide from the darkness that sought to claim Blackwood, or she could stand her ground and face it. The guardians had entrusted her with the crystal, with the legacy of the forest. Maeve could feel their spirits watching her, urging her to choose wisely. With a deep breath, Maeve made her decision. She would not run. The darkness may have returned, but she would protect Blackwood with all the strength she had. The forest had chosen her as its guardian, and she would honor that choice, no matter the cost. Maeve's resolve hardened as she stood alone in the clearing, her heart pounding. The figure's sinister words echoed in her mind, warning her of the darkness that was spreading through Blackwood. The crystal in her hand pulsed faintly, almost as if it sensed the urgency of the moment. Maeve knew that the darkness wasn't just a threat to the forest, it was a threat to everything she held dear. The weight of her responsibility felt immense, but she couldn't back down now. As she moved forward, the path seemed to shift before her, narrowing and twisting as if to challenge her every step. The trees around her groaned, their branches swaying ominously, casting long shadows that seemed to follow her every movement. Maeve quickened her pace, determined to reach the heart of the forest, where the final battle would unfold. The rising tide of darkness was relentless, and Maeve could feel it closing in, but she would not let it claim Blackwood. Deep within the forest, Maeve found herself standing before a massive tree, its trunk twisted and gnarled, its roots sprawling like a labyrinth beneath the earth. The tree seemed to radiate an ancient power, its presence both comforting and terrifying. This was the heart of Blackwood, the source of the forest's life and magic. The crystal in Maeve's hand pulsed once more, brighter than ever before, and she felt an overwhelming connection to the tree. She knew this was where the final confrontation would take place. The darkness that had been slowly creeping into the forest was now ready to strike, and Maeve was the only one who could stop it. She placed her hand on the tree's bark, and immediately the ground beneath her feet shook, as if the forest itself was awakening. From the shadows, the dark figure reappeared, its form more menacing than before. Maeve could feel the power of the darkness surrounding her, pressing in from all sides. The figure's eyes, glowing with an eerie red light, locked onto her with a hunger that made Maeve's blood run cold. "You should have stayed away," Maeve the figure hissed, its voice low and filled with fury. "You are not the guardian of Blackwood. You are its destruction." Maeve stood tall, gripping the crystal tightly. The tree behind her seemed to respond to her strength, its branches stretching out as if to shield her. The battle for Blackwood had begun, and Maeve was ready to fight with everything she had. The ground trembled as the shadow advanced toward Maeve, its presence growing more oppressive with every step. The trees around her swayed wildly, their branches creaking as if the forest itself was in agony. The crystal in Maeve's hand began to glow brighter, its light intensifying as if drawing from the very core of Blackwood's power. "Fight," Maeve, the voice of the Guardians, whispered in her mind. "You are the forest's chosen protector." With those words, Maeve felt a surge of energy rush through her body alight with the strength of the forest. She raised the crystal high, and the darkness recoiled, a screeching howl filling the air. The shadowed figure stopped in its tracks, its eyes widening in disbelief. "You dare challenge me," it sneered, but Maeve stood firm. The forest was with her, and together they would not be defeated. With a fierce cry, Maeve thrust the crystal forward, unleashing its full power. A brilliant beam of light shot from the crystal, blasting through the darkness and striking the figure square in the chest. The ground shook violently, and the trees around her seemed to pulse in time with the light. The shadow screamed in agony as the light consumed it, its form disintegrating into nothingness. The air around Maeve hummed with energy, and she felt the forest's heartbeat return to its steady rhythm. The darkness that had plagued Blackwood for so long was finally gone, banished by the strength of Maeve's will and the power of the crystal. She fell to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. The forest was safe once more. As the last of the darkness faded away, the forest around Maeve seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves rustling softly, as if thanking her for her bravery. Maeve stood up, her heart still racing, but filled with a sense of peace. The battle was over, and Blackwood was at rest. Maeve looked up at the sky, where the first rays of dawn began to break through the canopy. A new day had come, and with it, a new chapter for the forest. The guardian spirits watched over her, their presence calm and reassuring. Maeve knew her journey was far from over, but she had proven herself to be the true protector of Blackwood. And as long as the forest stood, so would she. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light through the trees, Maeve stood still in the heart of Blackwood. Though the darkness had been defeated, a sense of quiet stillness lingered in the air. The forest had returned to its natural beauty, but Maeve could feel that something had changed. The ancient guardians, who had whispered to her during the battle, were now silent, watching over her from the shadows. They had entrusted her with the power to protect Blackwood, and Maeve now had to ensure that the peace would last. The trees around her seemed to stir with a life of their own, their leaves rustling in the breeze, as if speaking to each other in secret. Maeve felt the weight of their gaze, the quiet expectation of the forest upon her. She had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but she knew that the forest would always need a protector. With that thought in mind, Maeve began her walk deeper into the woods, ready to embrace her new role as the guardian of Blackwood. As Maeve ventured deeper into the forest, she found herself drawn to a small, hidden glade. In the center of the glade lay a stone pedestal, ancient and weathered, with a depression in the center. Maeve recognized the pedestal. It was the place where the crystal had once been kept. She had used its power to defeat the darkness, but now it seemed that the crystal's journey was not over. The forest had called her here, and she knew what she had to do. She carefully placed the crystal into the depression on the pedestal, watching as the light from the gem pulsed and flickered, as if acknowledging her decision. The air around her seemed to thrum with energy, and the forest held its breath. The crystal was not just a weapon, but a symbol of the bond between Maeve and Blackwood. With a soft glow, the crystal settled into place, its power now linked forever to the heart of the forest. Maeve stood in the glade, the pulse of the crystal echoing through the ground beneath her feet. She could feel it now, the heartbeat of Blackwood itself. It was strong, steady, and full of life, just as it had always been. The darkness that had threatened the forest was gone, but the heartbeat remained a reminder that the forest's power was constant, enduring, and eternal. Maeve smiled to herself, feeling a deep connection to the forest and its ancient magic. She was no longer just a visitor here, she was part of the forest, and the forest was part of her. The guardians had chosen her, and in turn she had chosen to protect this sacred land. As long as the crystal remained, Blackwood would always have a heartbeat, and Maeve would be there to guard it. As Maeve left the glade, a gentle breeze began to blow through the trees, carrying with it the soft whisper of the forest. The wind seemed to guide her, as if the very air itself was urging her forward. Maeve closed her eyes and breathed in deeply, letting the scent of the woods fill her lungs. The forest was alive with the songs of birds, the rustling of leaves, and the distant sound of a stream flowing peacefully. It was a sound she would never tire of, a sound that reminded her of the balance that had been restored. She walked further, the path winding gently through the trees. The forest seemed to welcome her, its embrace warm and comforting. Maeve felt a sense of peace she had not known before, knowing that she was not alone. The guardians, the forest, and the creatures that lived within it were with her. She was now part of this ancient world, a protector and a friend to all. Maeve paused at the edge of a small clearing, looking out over the rolling hills of Blackwood. The sun was beginning to set, casting a soft, golden glow over the landscape. The forest stretched out before her, a vast and mysterious world filled with life, magic, and secrets. She knew that her journey as the guardian had just begun. There would always be challenges, always threats lurking in the shadows. But Maeve was no longer afraid. She had the strength of the forest within her, and with it she would protect this land for as long as she lived. "I promise," Maeve whispered to the forest, her voice steady and sure. "I will always protect you." The wind picked up, carrying her words through the trees, and Maeve felt the forest's answer, a soft, reassuring rustle of leaves. The guardians were watching, and Maeve had proven herself worthy. The bond between them was unbreakable. Blackwood would always be safe in her hands. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Maeve stood on a high ridge overlooking Blackwood. The forest stretched out beneath her, a dark sea of trees filled with whispers and secrets. The crystal in her hand glowed softly, its light mingling with the moonlight above. Maeve had come a long way, from a young girl lost in the woods to the guardian of Blackwood itself. She had faced the darkness, embraced her destiny, and now she was ready for whatever lay ahead. The wind carried the whispers of the forest to her ears, and Maeve smiled. She was no longer just a part of Blackwood, she was its heartbeat, its protector. And as long as the forest stood, Maeve would be there, an everlasting guardian, watching over the woods and the creatures that called it home. Blackwood was safe, and Maeve's journey had only just begun. Maeve lay beneath the ancient oak tree, the soft whispers of the wind cradling her to sleep. As her eyes fluttered shut, a strange vision filled her mind. She saw Blackwood, but it was not as it seemed now. The trees were twisted and gnarled, their once lush leaves now barren. The creatures of the forest moved in shadows, and the crystal that had protected the forest now lay dim and cold. Maeve stood alone, her heart heavy with fear. Was this a glimpse of the future? The dream was vivid, and it haunted her thoughts, leaving her with a sense of dread. She awoke with a start, her heart racing. The forest was still peaceful around her, bathed in the soft light of dawn. But the dream had left its mark, a question she couldn't ignore. What if the darkness was not truly gone? Maeve sat up, her gaze drifting to the crystal, still glowing softly at her side. She knew that her journey as the guardian was far from over. The dream was a warning there was still much to protect. As the days passed, Maeve couldn't shake the feeling that something was approaching. She felt a pull deep within her, urging her to venture deeper into Blackwood. The wind seemed to grow colder, and the whispers from the trees became more urgent. Maeve knew that she had to follow the call, but a part of her hesitated. What if the forest was leading her into danger? The darkness that had once plagued Blackwood could be stirring once again, and she needed to be ready. One evening, as twilight settled over the land, Maeve gathered her courage and set out toward the heart of Blackwood. The path grew narrower, and the air became thick with mystery. Every step felt as if she were walking closer to the unknown, but the pull was undeniable. The trees parted ahead, revealing a clearing bathed in an eerie light. There, in the center, stood a figure cloaked in shadows. Maeve's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment she had feared. The figure before Maeve moved slowly, its form shifting like smoke in the breeze. Maeve took a cautious step forward, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. The figure remained silent for a moment before it spoke, its voice a low whisper, barely audible above the rustling of the trees. "I am the shadow that has lingered in the corners of Blackwood," it said. "The darkness you thought was gone has only been waiting. You have failed to see the true danger that lies beneath the surface." Maeve's grip tightened on her sword, but she remained calm. The figure's words stung with truth, and she knew it was right there was something she had missed. The darkness had only been hiding, waiting for the right moment to return. Maeve's mind raced as she faced the shadow, her body tense with both fear and determination. The figure's words were clear. Blackwood's peace was not as permanent as she had hoped. "What do you want?" Maeve asked, her voice unwavering. The shadow didn't answer immediately. Instead, it extended a hand, the fingers long and pale. "Prove yourself," it whispered. "Show me that you are worthy of being the guardian of Blackwood." Without hesitation, Maeve stepped forward, her resolve hardening. She had always known that being a guardian meant more than just protecting the forest. It meant understanding its deepest secrets, confronting the darkness within. She closed her eyes and reached out, placing her hand in the shadows. In that moment, a surge of cold energy rushed through her, and Maeve felt as though she were being tested in ways she couldn't yet understand. The shadow was watching, waiting to see if she could overcome the fear that threatened to consume her. As the cold energy subsided, Maeve opened her eyes, finding herself standing in a vast, endless expanse of darkness. The forest, the trees, the crystal, everything was gone. It was just her, alone in this shadowy void. Panic surged within her, but Maeve fought to keep it at bay. The shadow's voice echoed around her, whispering words she couldn't fully comprehend. "Only when you face your deepest fear will the forest truly be yours." Maeve took a deep breath, her heart steadying. She closed her eyes again, this time focusing on the crystal's glow deep within her mind. The forest had always been with her, even when she couldn't see it. She had to trust that the strength of Blackwood's magic was within her. Not just the crystal, not just the trees. With that thought, the darkness began to recede, and Maeve found herself back in the clearing. The shadow had vanished, but its test had left her changed. She was no longer just the guardian of Blackwood, she was its soul. Maeve stood alone in the clearing, the forest now silent, as though it too was waiting. The shadow was gone, but its challenge had opened her eyes to a deeper truth. Blackwood was not just a forest, it was a living, breathing entity, and Maeve was now truly connected to it. She placed her hand on the crystal, feeling its warmth spread through her body, linking her to the heart of the forest. With a deep breath, Maeve whispered, "I am ready." The crystal pulsed in response, its light brighter than ever. The whispers of Blackwood filled her ears, the wind carrying the voices of the guardians who had watched over her. Maeve knew now that her journey had reached its true beginning. She had passed the test, embraced the darkness, and emerged stronger. Blackwood was hers, and she would protect it for as long as she lived. The first rays of dawn began to filter through the trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Maeve stood in the clearing, her heart calm and steady. The trial she had faced was over, but the journey was far from complete. Blackwood had accepted her as its true guardian, but there was still much work to be done. The forest's whispers had quieted, but Maeve knew the stillness was only a brief respite. She had to prepare for what was to come. As the sunlight touched the crystal, a new power stirred within Maeve. The forest was alive in a way she had never fully understood before. The trees seemed to hum with energy, and the winds whispered secrets she could almost grasp. She closed her eyes, listening carefully. The forest was telling her that something was approaching, something dark and powerful. Maeve took a deep breath, ready to face whatever challenge lay ahead. Days passed, and the air in Blackwood grew heavier, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. Maeve could feel the tension building, a sense of foreboding that clung to her every step. The once peaceful forest now seemed on edge, the whispers growing louder with each passing hour. Maeve spent her days walking among the trees, listening to their warnings, trying to understand the signs. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Maeve heard a voice, soft but urgent, carried on the wind. The darknesses near the words were not her own, but they resonated deep within her. Maeve turned toward the source of the voice, her eyes scanning the shadows. There in the distance, she saw movement, a shape, flickering like a shadow between the trees. Maeve's heart raced. The time had come. The darkness was no longer a distant threat. It was at the edge of the forest, waiting. Maeve followed the movement, her steps quick and determined. The shadows seemed to shift with her every movement, as though the very forest was guiding her. She reached a clearing, and there, standing in the center, was the shadow she had encountered before. It had returned, but it was no longer just a figure, it was something far more menacing. Its form was solid now, a towering presence that exuded an aura of power. Maeve could feel the coldness radiating from it, a reminder of the dark forces that had once sought to consume Blackwood. The shadow spoke, its voice deeper, more threatening than before. "You cannot stop what has already begun," it said. "The forest will fall. Its magic will be mine." Maeve's grip tightened on the crystal at her side. She could feel its warmth, its power, and she knew it was her only weapon against the shadow. "I will not let you take this forest," Maeve declared, her voice steady. The shadow laughed, its laugh echoing through the trees, sending a shiver down Maeve's spine. The forest seemed to hold its breath as Maeve faced the shadow. Her heart beat loudly in her chest, but her resolve was unshaken. She raised the crystal, and its light blazed brightly, illuminating the darkness around them. The shadow recoiled slightly, but it did not retreat. Instead, it began to move, its form twisting and swirling like smoke in the air. Maeve's eyes narrowed. She had to act quickly before the darkness could fully take hold of the forest. She stepped forward, the crystal glowing brighter with each step. The shadow lunged, but Maeve was ready. She thrust the crystal forward, and a beam of light shot from it, striking the shadow. The shadow screeched in pain, its form flickering and writhing. But it did not vanish. Maeve's heart raced as she realized that the shadow was not just a force, it was a part of the forest's darkness, something that could not be easily destroyed. The battle raged on, the shadow constantly shifting and reforming, trying to engulf Maeve in its cold embrace. But Maeve fought with all the strength she had, calling upon the power of the crystal. She felt the magic of Blackwood flowing through her, the very essence of the forest's life force connecting with her own. The light of the crystal grew brighter, pushing back the shadow with every pulse. For a moment, the forest seemed to stir, its branches swaying and its roots shifting beneath the ground. Maeve realized that the forest itself was fighting alongside her, its power merging with hers. She focused all of her energy on the crystal, knowing that only by combining her strength with the forest's magic could she defeat the shadow. The light grew blinding, and with one final burst, the shadow screamed and vanished into the air, leaving behind nothing but the echoes of its presence. The forest fell silent once more, the darkness retreating for now. Maeve stood in the clearing, panting from the exertion, but victorious. The shadow was gone, but she knew that the forest would always be vulnerable to such threats. As the light of the crystal faded, Maeve felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. She had defended Blackwood, but she also understood that her role as its guardian was far from over. She looked up at the sky, the first stars beginning to twinkle above. The forest, though safe for now, would always need her. Maeve made a promise to the land, to the trees, and to herself. As long as she stood as the guardian, she would protect Blackwood from the shadows, no matter how dark they became. The whispers of the forest were soft once more, but Maeve knew they would always be there, guiding her, as she walked the path of light. As Maeve walked through the forest, she felt a deep sense of calm. The air was still, but there was a faint sense of something new, something magical in the air. The trees seemed to welcome her, their branches swaying gently in the breeze, as though they were offering their gratitude. Maeve had not only defended Blackwood but had also bonded with it in a way she had never imagined possible. The forest had become a part of her, and she, a part of it. She stopped near an ancient oak, its bark twisted and knotted with age. As Maeve placed her hand on it, she felt warmth radiating from the tree, a sign that the forest was alive, more alive than she had ever realized. The wind carried a soft whisper, and she closed her eyes to listen. "Thank you," it seemed to say. Maeve smiled, understanding that this connection with Blackwood was a gift, one that would remain with her for as long as she lived. Days passed in relative peace. Maeve continued her role as the forest's guardian, walking its paths, tending to the plants, and listening to the whispers of the trees. The threat of the shadow had passed, but she knew it would not be the last. There were dark forces that lurked in the shadows, always waiting for a chance to strike. Maeve couldn't afford to let her guard down. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long, golden rays across the forest. It was a time of rest, a time for Maeve to regain her strength. But even in the stillness, she could feel a shift in the air. Something was coming. The forest had not forgotten the shadow, and its whispers had grown faint, as if warning her of something darker on the horizon. Maeve could only hope that when the storm came, she would be ready. It wasn't long before Maeve began to feel the weight of the growing darkness. The skies above Blackwood darkened, the once clear blue now clouded with thick swirling mists. The birds fell silent, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. Maeve's heart quickened, sensing the danger approaching. She rushed to the center of the forest, the place where the magic was strongest. There, she found a familiar figure, a shadow moving among the trees, its form shifting and changing as though it were made of smoke. The creature that had once threatened Blackwood had returned. But this time, it was not alone. Maeve's eyes widened as more shadows appeared, each one darker and more twisted than the last. The forest was once again under threat, and Maeve realized that the battle was far from over. Maeve stood in the clearing, her heart racing as the shadows closed in around her. The crystal at her side began to glow faintly, its light flickering like a dying star. She could feel the magic of Blackwood pulsing within her, but it was not enough. The shadows were stronger this time, and the forest was not as it had been. The trees were no longer whispering in her ear, and the wind had stilled. Maeve felt alone, isolated, as if the forest had abandoned her. But then, something extraordinary happened. The earth beneath her feet trembled, and the trees around her began to sway once more. The forest, it seemed, had heard her call. The whispers grew louder, stronger, guiding her. Maeve reached out, her hand trembling as she touched the crystal. A surge of energy shot through her, and the forest responded, its ancient magic coming alive in a way it never had before. The shadows faltered, pushed back by the combined power of Maeve and Blackwood. The shadows roared in anger, their forms twisting and writhing as they fought against the light that Maeve and the forest had summoned. But Maeve was resolute. She focused all of her energy on the crystal, calling upon the magic of Blackwood, her voice carrying the strength of the forest itself. "You will not take this place," she whispered, her words a promise to the land that had given her so much. The shadows screeched, but they could not match the power of Maeve and the forest. The light from the crystal grew brighter and brighter, pushing the darkness back, piece by piece. Slowly but surely, the shadows began to dissolve, their power crumbling under the weight of Blackwood's ancient magic. Maeve could feel their strength weakening, and with one final push, the shadows shattered, their presence vanishing into the wind. The forest was safe once more. As the last remnants of the shadows faded, the forest sighed in relief. The air was clear once again, and the trees whispered their gratitude to Maeve. She stood in the clearing, her heart still pounding, but her spirit unbroken. She had done it. The darkness had been banished for now. Maeve looked around, seeing the forest as she had never seen it before. It was beautiful, alive, and vibrant, and it was hers to protect. She made a vow, standing tall among the trees. She would never let the forest fall to the darkness again. No matter what came in the future, Maeve would always be there, watching over Blackwood with the strength of the earth beneath her feet and the magic of the trees in her heart. As long as she walked its paths, Blackwood would remain safe, protected by its true guardian. The forest's whispers would guide her, and together they would face whatever shadows might come next. Maeve stood in the heart of Blackwood, the forest now calm and bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. The battle was over, but the journey was far from complete. She knew that the shadows had been defeated, but the forest was still fragile. There were many who had yet to understand the deep magic of Blackwood, and many more who would seek to harm it. Maeve had made her vow to protect the forest, and she would honor that vow with her life. As she walked through the forest, she noticed the tiny signs of new life. The flowers that had once wilted under the shadow's weight were now blooming, vibrant and full of color. The trees, once heavy with sorrow, seemed to stand taller, their branches reaching to the sky. Maeve smiled softly, grateful for the healing that had begun. The forest was no longer just a place of mystery and danger, it was her home, her sanctuary, and she would fight to protect it for as long as she could. Maeve made her way to the ancient oak tree, the one where she had first felt the warmth and magic of Blackwood. She placed her hand on its rough bark, and this time it felt different. There was no fear, no urgency. The tree's presence was calm, almost as though it was sharing something important with her. Maeve closed her eyes, listening to the whispers of the tree. The tree's voice was deep and slow, like a secret passed down through generations. "You have protected us," Maeve, the oak's voice, said. "But there is still much to be done. The shadows may return, but they will not be the only threat. There are others who seek to destroy the balance. The forest needs more than a guardian, it needs a protector." Maeve felt the weight of the words, the responsibility pressing on her shoulders. But she knew the truth: Blackwood was not just a forest. It was a living, breathing entity, and it would always need someone to stand watch over it. Maeve spent the following days walking deeper into the forest, seeking the hidden corners she had never noticed before. There were parts of Blackwood that were shrouded in mystery, places where even the sunlight seemed to struggle to penetrate. As she ventured further, she realized that the forest was not just a sanctuary for the living, it was a place of power, where ancient forces lay dormant, waiting for the right moment to awaken. One evening, as Maeve rested beside a quiet stream, she felt a presence. It wasn't a physical form, but a sense of being watched. She turned, her heart racing, but saw nothing but the shadows of trees around her. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. For a moment there was silence. Then, from the darkness, came a soft voice, like a distant echo. "We are the Watchers, the protectors of Blackwood. You have done well, Maeve. But beware, for the forest is never truly safe." The voice faded, leaving Maeve with a sense of unease. She knew she had much to learn about Blackwood and the hidden forces that protected it. The next day, Maeve sought out the wise elder of the village, an old woman named Alara, who had lived near Blackwood for many years. Alara was known to have knowledge of the forest's deep magic, and Maeve hoped she could offer some insight into the mysterious voice that had spoken to her. Sitting in Alara's small cottage, Maeve shared her experience with the elder. Alara nodded slowly, her eyes filled with understanding. "The Watchers you heard are not of this world," Alara said, her voice tinged with a mixture of awe and caution. "They are ancient spirits who have always guarded Blackwood. The forest's power is old, far older than even I can comprehend. There are rituals, ancient ones, that were once performed to keep the balance. But the times have changed. The rituals are no longer practiced, and the guardians have become." Restless Maeve's heart sank. She had thought the shadows were the forest's only danger, but now she realized that there was much more to the forest's mysteries than she had ever imagined. Maeve's thoughts were troubled as she walked back to the forest. Alara's words echoed in her mind, and she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something darker lurking in the depths of Blackwood. She had always known that the forest was alive with magic, but now she understood that this magic was not as simple as she had thought. The power of Blackwood was ancient, and there were forces at play that Maeve had yet to fully comprehend. As she walked through the forest, she noticed something unsettling. The trees that had once seemed so friendly now appeared to be watching her, their branches shifting and creaking in the wind. The whispers of the forest had become more urgent, as though warning her of something just beyond the horizon. Maeve stopped, her senses on high alert. There was a disturbance in the air, a crackling tension that made her skin prickle. Something was coming, and it was unlike anything she had faced before. As Maeve made her way deeper into the forest, the shadows grew thicker and the light grew dimmer. The once vibrant trees now seemed twisted, their bark darkened by an unseen force. The forest that had been her home, her sanctuary, was beginning to change, and Maeve knew she was at the center of it. The Watchers had warned her, and now the forest itself was speaking in a language she could not yet understand. She felt a sudden cold wind sweep through the trees, and in the distance, the sound of a low growl reached her ears. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, closer. Maeve's heart raced as she realized that the balance of Blackwood was shifting. The shadows had not been defeated, they had only retreated, waiting for the right moment to return. And now, that moment was here. The path ahead was dark, and Maeve knew that she would have to face whatever dangers lay in wait. The forest's whispering shadows were not finished with her yet. As Maeve made her way deeper into the forest, the shadows grew thicker and the light grew dimmer. The once vibrant trees now seemed twisted, their bark darkened by an unseen force. The forest that had been her home, her sanctuary, was beginning to change, and Maeve knew she was at the center of it. The Watchers had warned her, and now the forest itself was speaking in a language she could not yet understand. She felt a sudden cold wind sweep through the trees, and in the distance, the sound of a low growl reached her ears. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, closer. Maeve's heart raced as she realized that the balance of Blackwood was shifting. The shadows had not been defeated, they had only retreated, waiting for the right moment to return. And now, that moment was here. The path ahead was dark, and Maeve knew that she would have to face whatever dangers lay in wait. The forest's whispering shadows were not finished with her yet. The growling sound grew louder, and Maeve stopped dead in her tracks, her pulse quickening. The air seemed to thicken around her, filled with a palpable darkness. She could no longer see the path in front of her. Everything was swallowed by the thick fog that had rolled in. The trees, once her allies, now seemed to close in around her, their branches twisted into grotesque shapes. Suddenly, from the dense fog, a pair of glowing eyes appeared, flickering like lanterns in the night. Maeve stepped back, instinctively reaching for her staff. The eyes grew larger, closer, and soon, a shadowy figure materialized from the mist. It was like nothing she had ever seen. Its body formed from swirling darkness, with sharp, jagged features that seemed to shift with every movement. Maeve's breath caught in her throat, and she stood frozen, unsure whether to fight or flee. The figure stepped closer, its dark form flickering like a flame. Maeve could feel its presence pressing against her, cold and suffocating. The air around her grew even colder, and she instinctively tightened her grip on her staff. The shadow's voice was low and raspy, like the rustling of dead leaves. "You are not ready," Maeve the shadow whispered. "You think you can save this forest, but it will consume you, as it has consumed others before you. Blackwood's secrets are too vast for you to understand." Maeve's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood her ground. She knew that she couldn't back down now. The forest had chosen her as its protector, and she would not fail. "You are wrong," Maeve replied, her voice steady despite the fear threatening to rise within her. "I will protect this forest, no matter what it takes." The shadow let out a haunting laugh, its eerie echo filling the space around them. "We shall see," it said, before dissolving into the fog, leaving Maeve standing alone in the dark. Maeve felt the air slowly return to normal as the shadow vanished, but she could still feel its presence lingering in the corners of her mind. The fog had begun to lift, but the path was now unfamiliar. The trees around her were no longer the ones she had grown up with. They had changed, their shapes twisting into strange, otherworldly forms. Maeve realized with a shiver that the forest was not the same. It had become something darker, more sinister. She moved forward, but every step felt heavier than the last. The forest was silent, as though holding its breath, waiting for something. Maeve's heart raced with every creak of the branches, every rustle of leaves. The forest was no longer the place she had once known. It had become a labyrinth of shifting paths, and Maeve was lost. She could feel the darkness closing in around her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched by something far worse than the shadow she had just encountered. As Maeve wandered through the twisting trees, she stumbled upon a small clearing hidden deep within the forest. The ground was covered in moss, and the air smelled of damp earth and ancient wood. In the center of the clearing stood a stone altar, its surface covered in moss and lichen. Maeve approached cautiously, sensing a strange energy emanating from the altar. She reached out and placed her hand on the stone, feeling the cool surface beneath her fingers. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a low hum began to fill the air, vibrating through the ground beneath her feet. The altar seemed to glow faintly, and the air around Maeve seemed to shimmer with magic. Maeve stepped back, realizing that this place was ancient, a forgotten part of Blackwood's magic. This was a place of power, and perhaps the key to understanding what had happened to the forest. As Maeve stood in the clearing, contemplating the altar's significance, she felt something shift in the air. The dark presence that had followed her seemed to waver, as though it was losing its strength. The hum from the altar grew louder, and for a brief moment, a warm light began to pulse from the stone. Maeve's heart raced, and she felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the answer she had been searching for. The light grew brighter, and Maeve closed her eyes, allowing the warmth to wash over her. In that moment, she felt a connection to Blackwood like never before. The forest was alive, not just with magic, but with a deep, ancient force. She understood now that the shadows were not just enemies, they were a part of Blackwood's history, its very soul. And she, Maeve, was the key to restoring the balance. The light around her grew brighter still, and she knew that her journey was far from over. The forest had more secrets to reveal, and Maeve was ready to face them, armed with the knowledge that she was not alone. The light of Blackwood's magic would guide her through the darkness ahead. As the light from the altar faded, Maeve felt a new sense of clarity. The forest was still at war with itself, but Maeve now understood that the shadows were only one part of a much larger picture. There was a greater force at work in Blackwood, an ancient power that had been forgotten for centuries. She could feel the pulse of it deep beneath the earth, calling her to uncover the final secrets of the forest. Maeve turned to leave the clearing, her heart steady and her mind focused. She knew that she was about to face her greatest test yet. The darkness had not been vanquished, it had merely retreated, waiting for the right moment to strike. And Maeve would be ready. She was the protector of Blackwood, and no shadow, no force, would stand in her way. The final test awaited, and she was prepared to meet it head-on, determined to save the forest she had come to love. As Maeve stepped away from the ancient altar, the whispers of Blackwood echoed in her mind, reminding her of the journey that still lay ahead. The shadows had not been defeated, but with every step, she was drawing closer to uncovering the secrets of the forest. The light of the forest was now her guide, and she knew that no matter the darkness she would face, she would never be alone. The story of Blackwood Forest was far from over. Its secrets, its magic, and its whispers would always remain, waiting for the next protector to rise. And so Maeve continued her journey, knowing that she was the key to restoring balance as the forest watched over her, silently, from the shadows. Thank you for listening to the Whispering Shadows of Blackwood Forest. Remember, sometimes the greatest mysteries are hidden in the darkest places. Until next time, may your dreams be as mysterious as the whispers of Blackwood.